say thank you to the Office of Graduate Education and to the Bioengineering Department for organizing this and allowing us to be part of Graduate Professional Week. I think this is a great week and a great event for our graduate students. So I'm happy to be here. I also want to say thank you to our 4 panelists who are with us today. I will introduce them here in just a minute. We do want this to be an interactive panel, so ask questions, type them in the chat if you'd rather do that. I do ask that you would raise your hand before you just start talking, though, just to make it a little bit easier on everyone here so we're not talking over each other. And if you're not talking, please mute your microphone. I will give out reminders if needed. This event is also being recorded, so if you'd rather not be identifiable with your question, type it in the chat, and that won't show up on the recording then. I will read it out loud for you. All right. Well, if there's no questions about the format for this, we'll go ahead and get started. Let me briefly introduce. We have Sanjana Jain with us. She is a product engineer at Alcon. Dr. Massa Shoura, who is the Arnold and Mabel Beckman Postdoctoral Fellow at Stanford University of Medicine. Iravati Ambike, who is a quality trust and endpoint clinical, and Dr. Desai, who if you don't mind, let's just start with Sanjana. Could you give us a little bit about your background, how you got where you are, just kind of describing your history, and then if we could just move on across all 4, we'll get going with that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Sanjana. I'm currently working as a product engineer at Alcon, Houston. So I did my master's in biomedical engineering at UTD. I've also completed my thesis in investigation of the effects of multiple implantations on implant healing abutments. I was working under Dr. Daniele Rodriguez, for about 2 years. I pursued my thesis at her lab. So before my master's, I was working at Accenture for about 14 months as a software engineer. I was working in SAP. So and I've done my bachelor's in biomedical engineering as well from Danand Sagar College of Engineering at Bangalore. Yeah, that's about it. So.
Thank you. Okay. Massa, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah, so I actually joined UTD as an undergrad, and I was in the fast track program in biology, got all my degrees at UTD, and was flexible enough to create a dual PhD program where I was able to get a PhD in biology and bioengineering. So I guess I spent 10 years of my life at UTD. I worked in Stephen Levine's laboratory in bioengineering, working mainly on physical applications in biology with focus on polymer physics. And then I moved to Stanford for my postdoctoral work.
Great, thank you. Iravati, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ravdianviki. I graduated from UTD with a master's in biomedical engineering in December 2019. And until very recently, I was working as a clinical research associate for a clinical research organization called MedPace, so basically in clinical trials. And now I'm a QTC engineer at Endpoint Clinical, which also works in clinical trials. And I work on the quality trust and compliance side.
Thank you. Vidhi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Vedi Desai. I got my bachelor's in biomedical engineering in India, and after that, I got my Ph.D. in bioengineering from University of Texas at Arlington, so kind of like a close cousin of UTD. And thereafter, I worked as a postdoc in University of Florida in I think the official title was Electrical and Computer Engineering Department, but it was also with a specific center for MEMS development. And thereafter, I moved to industry to join Abbott Neuromodulation. At the time, it was St. Jude Medical. And it's been a good 4 years at Abbott as a systems engineer.
Great, thank you. So at this point, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hands or go ahead and type. I will start with the next one, and then we'll just keep going. So thank you for the first answer. And now, can you explain how you actually got into your current position? So how did you find your job, or how did you get into it? Anybody wants to start, just go ahead. Sanjana, we can't hear you if you're talking. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. So I graduated in May 2020, and as usual, I was looking for options, and I had just finished my thesis. So Alcon as a company, they start off taking entry-level position as a contractor. So I got an opportunity from a consultancy, and so that's how I got this position. I interviewed for a different role, but when I came down to Houston and I interviewed, they always suggest if there's a better role for us. So I interviewed for validation engineer first, and then I found out that there's another opening for product engineer. So that's how I interviewed, and then back to back I had several rounds, and then that's how I got this position. So product engineer, day-to-day work as a product engineer is basically we manage, first of all, Alcon Houston, we work on cataract and vitreoretinal surgery equipment. Especially in Houston, we mainly work on those equipment. Our headquarters, US headquarters is in Fort Worth, Texas. So that's where they manufacture the pharmaceutical part of the business. So at Alcon Houston, we work on the surgery equipment. So the parts which go into the main machine, cataract and vitreoretinal surgery. So I work on those. Basically, I work on like supplier qualification, like material change if there is any. It's like a project manager. We handle the entire project while we are qualifying a different material for certain product, and handling the quality regulatory part of it, R&D part of it, and yeah, validating the entire. If you're qualifying some tool to change the material for any part that goes into this particular surgical equipment. So yeah, that's how. And it's been almost 1 year since I joined this company. It's been going great so far.
Excellent. I keep muting myself because my kids are running around in the background, so I apologize for like a few seconds.
Oh, you're fine.
Thank you. Vidhi, Iravati, Massa?
Yeah, so actually my trajectory is a bit different than the other people on the panel because I was focused on academic jobs. For that, I highly recommend finding a lab where the PI is invested in your academic, or, you know, it doesn't have to be academic, but like your career trajectory. So from the beginning, you have a conversation about what you're expecting and where you want to be. So they put you on the right path. So it's not like it's not like an application that can be done in 3 months or something like that. It's a whole trajectory. Find a lab where the PI would send you to conferences, international conferences, where you can present not just the PI. Definitely that being on the spotlight throughout my PhD time in the lab definitely helped reaching out to other labs. So the way it works to find a postdoc, you just the way I did it, I emailed maybe 10 labs. The first time I did it, nobody replied, and it turns out that because I was emailing labs during the government shutdown back then in 2014 maybe or 13, So yeah, find the right time to email. Don't email PIs when their grants are not are not. There's a danger that their grants are not going to get renewed. And then just go on interviews and find a place that you feel comfortable. And yeah, that's basically how I did it.
Did you have any sort of contract or agreement set up with your PI when you first started about how your career was going to progress while you were there?
I think that's different from lab to lab. Dr. Levine was very early on wanted to have the student tell them what they're expecting from the time in the lab. Like if you want to be in an academic trajectory, then he would encourage you to sign up for take the summer and sign up for internship programs. But if you want an academic trajectory, then you might need that summer to get another paper as opposed to doing an internship. So it's helpful to know. If you are undecided, that's still fine. And actually, the one thing I would say, maybe committing too early might not be that's one advice I would give. Don't commit too early because academia is not what it used to be, and industry might not be what it used to be. So I committed my trajectory from the beginning to academia. I don't have any industry experience. So if you're not committed, that's totally fine as well.
Thank you. Okay.
I can go next. For me, when I got into biomedical engineering for my master's degree, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to study further after graduation or go into the industry. And so I was lucky enough to intern at a small startup called Bioengineering in the summer of 2019. And that really helped guide my path after graduation, because I knew that I knew right off the bat that I wanted to go into industry after graduation. So once that happened, I started to just build my coursework in such a way that would help me get a job after graduation. And so I took a class with Dr. Porter in my last semester for quality and Six Sigma and Lean. And that's when I realized that I wanted to eventually work as a quality engineer for a medical device company. Post that, I was looking for job opportunities in December, and I was offered a role as a clinical research associate at MedPace. Even though that's not what I wanted to see myself doing in the future, like 5 years down the line, I still decided to take up that opportunity because I was lucky enough to get a full-time job offered to me during these conditions. And so I actually ended up loving it. I was really glad that I was open to doing something new that I was not aware about before. And so eventually I was still on the lookout for a quality engineering job because that's what I wanted to do. And so luckily I came across this opportunity, which is clinical trials plus quality engineering all into one. And so I decided to interview for it, and that's what I'm doing now. So yeah, that's how I got into where I am today.
Thank you. Okay, Vidhi?
Then, yes, is the question about how I got to the position where I am right now? I'm sorry,
Yeah. No, yeah,
okay.
no, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. So how did you come into your current position?
So I would say it, much like what Massa mentioned earlier, it's I'm one of those that has been very undecided, or rather not committed from the early on. So I spent a healthy, I would say, combining my undergraduate program, like the PhD experience and the postdoc. It was a good 7 years of research at the time point, but I have to mention that the lack of commitment early on was just towards a career trajectory, but I was very passionate and committed to my research topic and that field of neural interfaces and neuromodulation, because just from the get-go, I fell in love with that field. And I was sort of I came to the United States to pursue a master's degree. The plan at that time was like, oh, I'll get a higher education and then probably some work experience and I don't know, figure things out from what opportunities I'm exposed to. it just so happened that I fell in love with my research program, and then I was offered a PhD program, and it just continued. There was no looking back. And even for my postdoc, it wasn't something that I was actively looking for. Right after my PhD defense, I was sort of like, I had a conference lined up and I was presenting there, and the program manager who had funded my research was in the audience. And just after the presentation, you were talking, what's your plans? Are you graduating anytime soon? Yes, I am. And just, it was very organic. And I just jumped on it. It sounded like the right fit because it was a different opportunity to expose myself to a different field of expertise. So it's still the same field, but the core things that I would learn was different than what my PhD was about. So it was an opportunity to learn. And even in UF, when I've been there as a postdoc, it's a very great experience. I can talk more in details depending on the next questions, but there's a lot of support system that I had, and I was fortunate enough to, at every point, even during my graduate research program, I was lucky enough to do some mentors to be sent abroad to a very renowned university for 6 months just to do research somewhere else. And in each place, I found that support network who was wanting to grow me into whatever career path I wanted. And at UF, about 1.5 years into postdoc, they started asking me, like, let's look at grants and the next professorship, or, how are you going to take your steps towards that route? And I realized I hadn't thought that far. I always wanted to go to industry and do, make new products, because it's difficult once I get committed again to the professorship route and you're invested in it. It'd be very difficult to switch, is what my thought process was. And I said, well, if I have to try industry, now's the time, before I get too invested down in the academic route. So at that point, I just interviewed at one place, and it was not an interview being sought in that manner. I was more looking for informational interview with reaching out to somebody that I thought had a strong academic background and a director level position in Abbott or in St. Jude at the time. She was very nice and directly called me for an interview, and things lined up, and here I am. So it's very unconventional in that sense, and organic at the same time.
Thank you. Well, following along with what you were just asking, or what you had mentioned, so you mentioned a few of the resources that kind of helped you to get where you are now. So let's play that for everyone. What were the most useful things that you found? The groups, the students, whatever thing helped you along your way. What worked for you?
I can answer
take
that.
This one.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ava.
Go ahead, Vidhi.
No, go ahead.
So I would like to begin with LinkedIn. That's your best friend when you're looking for a job. It's so great. You get to connect with so many people in the same industry as you, in the same field, in the same job description as you. You get to reach out to them. Even if they're not your connection, there is a way to message them. And there's different features that you can utilize in your benefit to reach out to people that can help you guide your path further. So I think that building a good LinkedIn profile and reaching out to people on LinkedIn is the best way to move forward when you're looking for a job. Another thing that I did was other websites that I used were like Glassdoor and Career Builder, all of those commonly used websites, just to look out for what positions are currently available in the market. And that kind of helps you. If you see something on Glassdoor, it's easy to find similar people and similar jobs on LinkedIn, and then reach out to the specific people associated with that job, so that you know that you're not just shooting in the dark. Like when you reach out to someone, you're actually going to get something out of it. It's important to do that, because when you're investing effort into something, it should give you some results back, right? So I think it's important to do what you're doing in a very organized way. So I think taking Glassdoor and LinkedIn, taking I don't remember the name of the website, the other website I used to look for jobs. But it's one of those. So basically, just using all your resources hand in hand and moving forward is important. And being in touch with your alumni network, especially those who are international students as well and are working in the industry, it's important to be in touch with them. If they have any openings in their companies, they can help you out. They can give you referrals. Or when they were looking for jobs, they know what it was like when they were doing it, so they can give you some advice. So I think it's important to stay in touch with your alumni network as well and talk to your professors. Dr. Porter here is a really great resource in the bioengineering department. Whenever I had questions regarding my resume, cold emails, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, I always went to him for advice. And he was nice enough to help me out each time. So I think it's also important to talk to your professors as well.
Thank you. Actually, there's a follow-up question from you, from Ankita. What kinds of questions or things did you say in your initial connection message to people when you were trying to make your connections on LinkedIn? How did you connect with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the thing that I started out with was making a short speech. I used like some templates online, and then I actually went to a class that was that Dr. Porter took in my last semester. That we discussed cold emails for a little bit. And so I kind of had an idea of how to go about it. But the best way to do that is just have a short, brief introduction of what you currently do and what you want to see yourself doing, and like a reason for why you're connecting with them. So if I'm reaching out to a quality engineer and say like Smith and Nephew, you just say that, hi, I'm interested in the product line of your company and I'm doing so and so right now. I want to see myself doing so and so in the future. So I want to talk to you about your day-to-day at the company. So would you be are you open to connect with me? Is just something like that. Like a small format is what you set for yourself, and then cater it according to the people you're reaching out to.
I think you made a great point there too about finding the template on online. Pretty much for anything that you need a template for, if you're doing cover letters or anything like that for a particular situation, you can almost find suggestions that people have put out there, and those can be really helpful. So I think that's great advice. Thank you. Okay. Massa, how about you? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Vidhi.
Now, I just want to say that I really echo what Ira said. In general, I think that, and I'll take it a step further. I personally benefited a lot from LinkedIn, but I'll take it a step further to say it's more important to establish real connections, where whether it's with your professor, whether it's with your collaborator, during research. Some of you may be master's students or even bachelor's for that matter. Whoever that your professor or peer, alumni, finding that real connection and trying to establish a sincere equation goes a long way, as opposed to when I used LinkedIn in 2013, 2014 timeframe, it's just exploded much more. Social media and everything is just exponentially each year. And so it's very easy to establish 500 connections or 500 plus connections by just sending a link, but you won't really benefit from it until there is a, that human to human thing. It's a great tool to, that the directory is it's vast, like you can reach out to anybody and whoever. I'd say one thing that I did do on LinkedIn was study the career trajectory, kind of like what we're talking about right now. A lot of professors are established, like if you're thinking about a director in R&D or regulatory affairs, study the career trajectory of so many people in different companies, different industries. Try to understand what took them where they are. And a lot of, I'm guilty, my LinkedIn profile is probably outdated and I'm speaking so much about it. It's completely outdated. But a lot of folks have taken good effort into writing their summary and what are the key skills that they have, what are the things they're passionate about. So getting to know somebody beyond a name and establishing that, here's who I am, and that connection is very important. And I think I personally have, that can even if it doesn't help you get your next job, it can help you find a mentor, find a coach, just learn about what your profiles that you might be interested in as a professional, on that trajectory. So I think establishing real connections, whether it's, with your PI, whatever resource you have available, if it's an alumni, professor, collaborator, professors, collaborators, wider academic network or industry network, it's that real connection is very important. And then people really are wanting to help each other, is my personal experience. That if we reach out with the right sincere ask, even if someone's busy, it may take repeated asks, so don't get dejected. It's not personal. It's just that everyone has a lot going on. But if it's a sincere ask and if it connects to that person, people usually want to help. That's my take.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. The one other thing I would add about looking at other people's profiles, not just watching their career trajectory, but it can be helpful for when you're setting up your own LinkedIn profile to see what you like about everybody else's. So the way they do their summary, did that way work better for them? Does it make more sense to you to do bullet points or to do the paragraph form or whatever like that? So copying, in this case, not word for word, but the kind of the format. Good. Excellent. Thank you. So Abbott, I see your question in the text. Let's go ahead and finish with Sanjana and Massa on this current question, then we'll come back to that. So Massa or Sanjana?
Yeah, so actually, I want to add a few things here. So from my experience, for academia, you really don't want to use LinkedIn. Most professors, don't have LinkedIn, and they don't really check LinkedIn. You want to go the email route. I do understand that LinkedIn is very important. I mean, now that I have a startup company, that immediately every VC is like, oh, so what is your LinkedIn profile? So I definitely started looking at my LinkedIn profile more. The other thing is, keep in mind that when you send an email to a professor, probably the professor is also getting maybe 10 emails a day of similar kind. Do not send an email that says, dear sir / ma'am. If anything, use the LinkedIn or use the university website to at least know the gender of the person who you are sending an email to. The most important advice that I want to say, so when I applied for this postdoc position, my PI now at Stanford, he's a Nobel laureate. And when my UTD PI encouraged me to apply, I was thinking like, okay, there's no way that I'm gonna even get a response from this person. So especially maybe for women in the crowd, do not think that you cannot get a position without applying for it. Always apply. And just make the email very personal. Talk about yourself. Talk about how you can fit in that lab. So it's going to take a little bit of customization. Don't copy paste the same email to 10 different labs. And propose something that you think that project would benefit a lot from being in this particular lab as opposed to other labs. So make them also feel special. So tell them that they're going to benefit from having you and how you will benefit from being in that environment.
Excellent. I think that actually answered Abbas's question. So perfect. Thank you. Okay, Sanjana?
Yeah, so I didn't have any industry experience before I started off as a product engineer. So I was working, like I mentioned earlier, I was working at Dr. Rodriguez's lab. So the way I got the opportunity was I had taken her class. So I knew what research she was working on. So I had a brief overview of what she was working on. And when we were meeting because of some project related to the coursework, that's how I got to know there was an opportunity, and I started volunteering. And once she realized that I had a potential, and then that's how she offered the project. And my project was a part of a big NIH project, which was basically a preliminary study. And I completed my thesis, and I got like 2 journals out of it. So that was a very good experience. with respect to research. While I was working, that's when I realized that I have good exposure to research, and I wanted to experience more of industry. So that's when I started looking for opportunities which involved more of research. Like how Iravati was mentioning, even I had interviewed something related to that position where they were where it's more of a second round of clinical trials. What we do, what we were working on was more of in vitro, and that was more of a next step. So I was mainly interested in such roles, and we were fortunate enough to have 2 courses where we could learn regulatory and quality part of the industry. Not every university offer such courses, so we had that exposure as well. Though we didn't have industry experience, we at least got to know the theory part of it, so that that actually helped me with my interviews. Since we are addressing international students, what I would recommend is any opportunity that comes across, just take it, even if it's like a contract position. Don't directly aim for full time. Given the current situation, it's always hard for us to bag a full time position easily. I mean, it might work out, but if it doesn't work out, it's always good to get into the industry and then figure out options, because even I was very hesitant to take up this interview, because I was interviewing for a validation engineer, but that was not my interest per se, but I wanted to give it a try so that I can get into the industry, because Alcon is a very good company. It's one of the leading companies for eye care. So I really liked what they were working on. So I always wanted to get into something related to cardiac surgery or something, critical care. But yeah, I care as well as critical care when it comes to healthcare. So that's when I interviewed for this position. But then once they found out that I have potential for a better role, that's when they offered to interview for a new role. So it's always good, no matter how, if it's just a contract for 6 months, doesn't matter. Always take up the interviews. That will help you in understanding how the interview process works. It depends. It differs from company to company, but it's always better to have some exposure towards how it works in the real industry. So it's always good to take up interviews, no matter how small the role is, how different it's from your point of interest. Because I've noticed, especially people who pursued a thesis and masters, they always try to look for positions which are particular what they had pursued. So it's very hard, because I worked on dental implant healing abutments. So I can't just restrict myself to get opportunities in dental care. So I was open to options. I was open to all kinds of medical devices. Even since I had some experience with cell culture and bacterial culture, I was open to pharmaceutical and drugs field as well. So yeah, it's always good to be open to options, and you never know with what opportunity will work out for you. Yeah, like everyone mentioned, even I used LinkedIn. I used um, there are so many websites which list out biomedical companies. I found out, I can't remember it over my head, that there was one website where they had listed biomedical companies. They had categories where since again sponsorship is an issue for us, so they had listed out which companies sponsor and which company don't, and if it's a contract. If I could find that, I can definitely email it to Dr. Porter, and he can circulate that. That was that very helpful website for me. And also these job portals, sometimes they post which are already filled. So it's always good to go to the company website and make sure that the role is still active, and not blindly just apply on LinkedIn and assume that the position is still open. So it's always good to go back to the company website, if at all they have one, and verify that the job is still open, the position is still open, and it's not outdated, and make sure you apply and keep track. Yeah, I think that's how this worked out for me.
So a couple takeaways there. I think that was use your job search strategically. and don't limit yourself on what you're looking for. And use a variety of sources and checking out the websites. That's great. Thank you. So Ankita has a general question. Say you've done an informational interview with someone and you realize partway or all the way through the interview that you're not really interested in that field right now. How do you recommend keeping connected with them or connecting them, but not really ghosting them, right? So how do you keep connected with somebody who's not necessarily in the field you want to be in?
Yeah, I mean, if you really think that's not something you're really interested in, and obviously if you're direct, not in a rude way, but if you're direct to them and see that this is not something I was actually looking for, but it was a great opportunity that I learned before, proceeding forward. I think they'll be happy about it that you didn't pursue something which you're not really interested. I mean, they don't want you to work if you're not really interested. So maybe you can approach and let them know that it was a great experience, that you interviewed, and you when you spoke to them, that you realized that this is not something we're actually looking for. So it's better to be direct than take up something which you're not at all interested in, and that would affect your performance, and eventually it's not a good thing for the company or for yourself. So yeah, I prefer that you be direct with them, and make sure that you mention it to them that it would be great that you want to keep in touch, and if something else opens up, some other role in the same company which might match up your interests, and yeah, I think they would be okay with it, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to add to that?
From an academic point of view, after you interview, so for example, I had a list of like 5 labs that I thought these are the labs that I want to join, but after the interview, you then realize maybe this is not the right environment. You can just say, thank you, this is really great. I just like, there's another project that might benefit from other tools, but keep in touch with them, because especially if you want to stay in academia, these people might be reviewing your grants later. These people might be in conferences later. And the best way to do that, like what I have been doing, is like when I publish a paper, I send it to them and I ask them for their opinion. And, when I see them at conferences, I make sure that I go to their posters. So it's not like a rejection of their research program. It was more like, maybe a personal decision that I decided to go elsewhere.
Yeah, and you never know when you actually in an opportunity to collaborate with somebody too. So even though you might not be interested now, who knows what's going to happen 10, 20 years. So excellent. Okay, thank you. So Diana has a question for Sanjana. How did you approach questions asked during the interview where you might not have much knowledge over that certain topic? And really, it's probably for anyone, but Sanjana?
Yeah, so the questions which come out, usually they'll include questions mainly within the job description. So it's always good to research about the company, what they're working on. You don't have to know in detail, but they'll like it if you have done your research from your end about the job description and the company itself, what they work on, and in general about the company. So the questions, if it's something technical, yeah, you can definitely, it again depends on the interviewer how they would approach your response. So if you don't know something, it's always advised to not beat around the bush and answer something which is wrong. It's always better to tell them that this is not something I have worked on, or this is not something I was exposed to, but you're always up for learning, and you're like a fast learner, and given a chance, you definitely gain experience over the time. You'll learn eventually. So it's always better to tell them directly that this is not something I have knowledge with, but I'm open to learn given a chance. So yeah, that's how I always make sure that I research well with the job description. If it's something easier to learn, like preparing for interviews, it's always better to go through whatever is in the job description. It's always better to take online courses, especially with quality and regulatory roles. There are so many platforms where you could sign up for courses, and yeah, because not everything is included in our coursework. Few courses you always have to sign up online, and that's how you gain exposure. And even when whatever you learn in those courses, it's not necessarily that you use that while you're working, because it depends on company to company and how each company works. So you always let them know that you're open to learn and you're a fast learner, and given a chance, you'll learn whatever is required for that role.
I think it's a great answer. I think I would just add also, so when you're mentioning that you're a quick learner, telling them strategies on how you would go about learning it will go a long way too.
Yes, definitely.
So saying that you would use these online resources or anything like that, that's great. Does anybody want to add to that?
I'd add to that, and I echo everything that Sanjana said. I would specifically mention that it's really hard to apply for a job where you meet 100% of the criteria, especially in industry domain. It just doesn't work that way. And I think on the other end, the hiring managers are also cognizant of that fact, right? No one's looking like it would be a jackpot if someone has done exactly everything, single thing that they are looking to, hire for. But I think and people have much more experience on the other side of the table to identify problem-solving skills. And then what you just mentioned, the ability to learn. So the two different, the agility to learn and the problem-solving skills. And then if you have, the intersection of the same skills and the same experience, that's great. But if a question is very pointed towards a technical topic, don't waste anyone's time by just, superficial answers. And, it's like, I had read it somewhere, or I came across a saying somewhere, like knowing the name of something is different than knowing it. So just because, you can say something doesn't mean, because you're digging your own grave, so to speak, in the interview to expose your own. But if you're confident and you know more, of course, go for it. But speaking high, that also should not preclude you from being creative and speaking high level on something. But make sure that you're reflecting your tone of answering in that same vein. Don't try to be a subject matter expert kind of tone where you're not. And again, I personally believe a healthy amount of sincerity and genuineness is much more palatable and goes a long way than the alternative.
Yeah, agreed. That's a really good point there about the job postings. Those are kind of like a company's wish list. Like that's their perfect applicant, what they're hoping they can possibly get, but they probably won't ever get. So don't be discouraged by the job posting if it's listing things that you don't have experience in necessarily. No, great point. Okay.
I'd like to add to that really quickly. So I think Sanjana brings up a really great point. If you don't know the answer to something, you should just say that you're not aware of what exactly they want and you're willing to learn. I think that's a great way to go than lying about it, because if later on you get hired and they realize that you don't know it, you're going to start building a really bad reputation for yourself in the company. So stay away from that. I think for entry-level roles specifically, like Vidhi said, you're not going to match every criteria in the job description. It's impossible to do that because all of us have such versatile or different skill sets. So I think it's important for an entry-level role to keep in mind to know your resume really well, know every line on your resume, and make sure that you don't have exaggerated experience on your resume, because they are going to ask you questions about that. They read your resume in depth before they ask you questions. So make sure that everything is on your resume, you're aware of it, and you've actually done it, so that you can describe it to them and let them know that how you can transfer the skills on your resume to what they want to do at the company. So even if you've not done exactly what they want at the company, you need to convince them that what I've done in the past is going to help me to do what I'm going to do in the future. So I think that's very important to keep in your mind. And the second thing is to know the product well, like Sanjana said, research the company, research the person you're talking to, look at their LinkedIn profile, look at their background. Sometimes, even if you don't know what they're doing now, if they worked at a different company in the past and you have background in that, you can initiate conversation based off of that. So it's important to make a report with the interviewer and make a connection with them and have like a two-way conversation than them asking you questions and you just racking up your brain to give them some kind of answer for them to accept you. So just keep these things in mind, research the company and know your resume.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, we have a couple more questions that have popped up, so let's go back a little bit. We have one that says, I'm an undergraduate sophomore biology major. I was wondering what I can do to prepare to apply to bioengineering grad programs besides getting research experience. So in addition to research experience, what can people be doing now in order to prepare for bioengineering in graduate school? Open question.
Sorry, is the question what preparation to be done as an undergrad?
Yeah, what can an undergraduate be doing now to help prepare for applying to graduate school in bioengineering and maybe for actually going into bioengineering aside from research?
I've been really, it's been a while, from 4 years since academic experience, but I would say one thing that has stuck with me is from a different experiences, whether it was in Europe or in University of Florida and even at UTA, I realized that professors as well and labs are looking for well-rounded individuals. So it's not your prerequisite is interest in research and if any of healthy decent grades. So all of those, like being a good decent student, is a prerequisite. I'm not saying that there is an exception for that or substitute for it, but also it's good to find out if you're thinking about a master's program first or a PhD directly. I know that during my it's difficult to find that perfect fit. It's almost like trying to hunt because you're committing your time and energy and a lot of it's just a lot of personal sacrifices of your good chunk of your life that you're making to a lab or a PI or a field of research. So exploring more in undergrad, because where is it going to be the right fit? What kind of lab culture? What kind of teammates? Do you want a small lab or a large lab? Do you want a lab that's well organized, very well established, where you have like almost like a hierarchy going on? You don't see the PI once a year, you'd be lucky. You just see the postdoc, or you just see even another senior PhD student. There's nothing wrong in it. There are different pros and cons or benefits for each approach, but finding that which structure is most suitable, or you want to find a small lab where you kind of wear multiple hats. You could be a lab manager one day, you could be the intern the other day, you could be the packaging guy the other day, and just your full-time research role. It just depends on what that fit is. So I think exploring is very critical, and figuring out how you would find that right fit, which I think strictly comes from exploring and knowing yourself and the other opportunity. That's what I would say. And like I mentioned, it's not that perfect fit. Doing more stuff that makes you well-rounded as an individual. Don't ignore that.
I would add to that if you I know this is a challenging time, but at the same token, everything being on Zoom, actually there are a lot of conferences that are now even free on Zoom. So if you have a particular interest, I would try and find these conferences. I would attend those conferences, and then I would try and talk to the presenters. So if there is a particular lab or particular labs that interest you, it would be good to talk to the professor even before applying, because not that they will write you a recommendation letter or anything, but knowing them, and they might even give you advices about how to go about applying, because a lot of times there are multiple ways to get into the same department and the same degrees, like what you could do, that you could join the lab, you could get experience there and then apply. I see that happening all the time. So if you have particular interests, I would encourage you to try and make connections now, so that you would be guided when you're applying. You would be applying to the universities, but with particular labs in mind, especially if you want a PhD.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I'm going to add just a few more things in there, because this is kind of one of my soapboxes with one of my classes. So they mentioned finding information a lot. So doing informational interviews where you go and you talk with the PI, when you go and talk with current graduate students, to kind of find out what is it like working with this person, and then also talking to alumni from their lab to figure out where they've gone. And now that they're not under that person, what was their experience like with them? The further out they are, usually they can give you kind of a little bit more clarity on kind of how it all worked out. Other things you can do now, so going towards being well-rounded, joining student organizations. So UTD, there's the Biomedical Engineering Society. We have a student chapter. Joining journal clubs, reading more and more research articles so that you're used to it, because you're going to do a lot of reading articles in graduate school. So there's a journal club for the biosciences that recently formed, where they actually review articles and kind of help each other read them. So that's another good one. And then related to letters of recommendation, you will need letters of recommendation regardless of where you go, right? So for graduate school, there are letters. For applying for jobs, you need references. The faculty need to know you in order to do that. So you can be in one of my classes with 40 or 50 other students and come up and ask me for a letter of recommendation at the end of the semester, but if all I have is your grade to write about, that's not very impressive. If I know you because we have a rapport, because you've been talking to me and I know your interests and I know what's been going on, it's a little easier to write a good letter. So that's my few quick add-ins there. So Ankita, I have a question here, but I want to throw in one more because this is a rather unique panel, being international alumni. What were the biggest challenges that you've had in finding your current position, given that you're an international student, and how have you overcome that?
Since that was a question for me, I'll try to answer for both the questions. So to answer Ankita's question, so I agree that I think it's just a software which picks up few words from your resume, and that's how they pick your resume, and they keep sending out those emails that this position is open. Because I had experience with SAP back in India, and then I still keep getting emails for those opportunities, because SAP is also like a very blooming field in US especially. So I agree that you get a lot of emails which you're not really interested in, but this I got a random call one day saying that my resume was in one of the job portals, and this is what the position is open for. So yeah, definitely not electrical or mechanical, but sometimes you get calls which are from biomedical company, but that's not exactly what you're looking for, especially if you're into research, and you might get calls for quality engineer or like a validation engineer or something related to regulatory. Just try and give interviews for that as well. If you have some exposure to it, you might not end up getting the job, but it's always, like I mentioned earlier, it's always better to try out new uh, new opportunities. So if it's something that you're not completely exposed to, but you do have some interest in, it's always good to take up those interviews. And maybe once you get into the company, there will always be different opportunities that open up later, and you can definitely switch. So for us especially, it's hard to get into the industry because they always prefer taking up people who don't need sponsorship eventually. So getting into, especially all these big companies like Abbott, Zimmer, the entry level, they don't uh, take full-time positions. They always take contracts. So sometimes I've had a few friends who were a contractor. They worked for about 2 or 3 years, and then they applied for H1B, but it didn't get picked. But so the company was willing to take up their day one CPT and make sure they're in the company, because if they really like you, some companies, they won't let you go. So it's always better to if it's something you have slight interest in, it's always good to get into it, and then maybe explore opportunities. That's how I used to answer when they used to ask questions like, this is something I'm interested in, but something else might come up later. So I always would like to explore my options. They prefer people who are flexible, who would be open to whatever they offer. So that's how I got a call. So I directly didn't approach the recruiter. I got a call for a role, and I interviewed. And so though I went through recruiter, going forward, it was always directly with the company, with Alcon itself, because my current manager, he made sure that I interviewed for a different role, and they really liked me when I interviewed for validation engineer. They said I was overqualified for that role, and I would not be completely interested in going forward. So they suggested that you should interview for this role because you are a better fit for this position. So you never know what will work out for you. So yeah, that's how I took up this position. Um, Challenges faced, again, our major challenges, sponsorship. So there are several companies, like with one go, they'll be willing to sponsor, but few companies, they're not aware that we would need sponsorship. That is another challenge, where you'll have to explain it to them how it works, because one challenge is that they have to sponsor you. The other challenge is paperwork. Some companies, they don't really want to get into it because they have to hire a lawyer and they have to do all the paperwork. They won't be willing to do that. So it's always better to tell them. You can't directly tell them that, oh, I'll work for 3 years and then I'll switch to a different company where they'll sponsor. So you can always tell, I'm open, irrespective of the sponsorship, I'm open to apply for this position, because if they really like you, some companies, you might be the first international student who would require sponsorship. So they might open up, given that they really like you, they really like your work, especially with the startup companies. If they really like what the work you do, they'll be willing to sponsor you eventually. So that is definitely our biggest challenge for us. So you should always tell them that you're open to start off even without sponsorship, because I've seen so many people, my friends, who were rejecting companies because they said that they're not going to sponsor, though they were willing to hire you. So make sure that you tell them that it is okay for now to start off, because we have 3 chances to get sponsored. So it's always better to start with some company and maybe gain experience. That will definitely help you to switch later. So it's always better to have industry experience if you're switching to a better company which you're always interested to apply, and they always wait for you to have some experience before taking you in. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So we are out of time. I think if any of the panelists would like to hang out and take their chance at answering that question, would be fantastic. But if you have to go, completely understand. I do want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you to our panelists, especially for joining us today. And hopefully everyone found this useful. So yeah, that's it for me. But for what I want to do, I want to go ahead and give everybody else an opportunity to answer that question. So if you don't have to go immediately, if you'd like to answer the question, please do.
Hey, Ben, I have to jump off in the next 5 minutes.
Okay.
But it's sort of on the topic of sponsorship, but I don't know if, was the question specifically towards sponsorship, or did I miss the original question somewhere?
The question was about any challenges of just trying to get a job as an international student to begin with, but sponsorship is certainly a big part of it.
Right. So I'd say yes, sponsorship is a big challenge from our individual standpoint, from the other side of the table, which is the applicant. Now again, like Sanjana has mentioned, it differs whether you're a small startup or applying for a small startup versus a medium scale or a large organization. My personal experience, and I understand everyone may have different experiences, whether it was academic, I also was exploring a startup right after PhD, like there were 2 offers, both organically happened. People on the other end are not exposed to funnily enough, the immigration or the international details. They don't understand it. They're surprised a lot of times, like, well, what are you talking about? What is this all about? For example, I was on my what do we call it, OPT during my postdoc, and we had to do that extension or something, and it took the longest time to make my PI understand what he needed to sign off on some new training form or something at the time. I don't remember anymore. But so there is an explanation and learning curve that I think it's your responsibility to disseminate that information correctly, genuinely, and without overcomplicating the paperwork. Again, it's just the right level of information that needs to be shared. But in general, I think everyone's more than willing to help and do what it takes for the right applicant. So if they really want to hire you, they'll figure it out. It's the bottom line that I've experienced in academia. When academic, there is not a lot of, the sponsorship, because there's no lottery system and all of that, it's just much more. And the resources and infrastructure is much different. Small startup is, again, like you mentioned, Sanjana, that somebody has to hire. You might just very well be the first international person for whom they're to figure it out. But it's possible, and it doesn't take a lot of complicated. They can hire a consulting lawyer and so on. And large industries too. I personally haven't encountered anyone having a big hurdle towards the sponsorship. No one's looking at sponsorship as a go, no go. Like no industry, no hiring manager is going to say, well, I want to hire this person, is the perfect candidate, that 100% fit, but they require sponsorship, not going to do it. And again, it's case to case specific, but generally speaking, I don't think that really is going to hold someone back too much. On the flip side, as an individual, I'll on the record say I haven't been selected in H-1B lottery for 3 times. I am that unlucky person that we can use as an example. And I have had to explore alternative routes like an O1 visa and so on. But in general, I don't think it should get too much in the way, and I recommend. It's very difficult because of the uncertainty it brings to not know where your immigration status is going to be, or like work authorization. It's just as simple as that. I would if it's possible, and everyone's situation is different, do not get too bogged down by all those things, meaning don't put it at the forefront of your career trajectory. At least that's my advice. You could have opportunities as a contractor if that's working out, and then full-time, depending on the right fit, it will work out. And it may also be that you get an opportunity to work in Canada for 2 years before you can apply again. Like, there's just so many opportunities to explore if one is creative. I will mention that when I was taking up my job at Abbott, I was so hesitant to make that switch. I was anxious because I had only one H-1B chance available, like in that lottery thingy. And I didn't get selected. So I was like, well, it's a risk. And I was very transparent again with my hiring manager. And she was like, well, we'll take the risk. People always take risks. And, as long as you're willing to take that risk, we'll take it. Because I had to be upfront with her that I may not be able to work after 6 months if I'm not selected. And then during that, we explored so many backup routes and alternative paths. And I was fortunate enough, and I had to work a lot on it to prepare my O1 application. And it worked out. So, but the company was willing to, make it work now. And since then I applied again and again, and I just don't happen to get selected. Something about the lottery doesn't work for me. They don't like me. But and then there are opportunities to explore in the same company or different routes outside the United States and come back. And I understand that's not possible for everyone. So just be open-minded and don't get bogged down by sponsorship. It is a real challenge, I'll admit that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I understand you have to go, so I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Yep. Bye, guys. Have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ira, Massa, is there anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I think, like Vidhi said, and I think also Sanjana mentioned, it's important to not get demotivated. You have to keep going at all times. Vidhi was lucky enough that a company was willing to explore options for her, but I've had multiple where I interviewed for large companies. I've interviewed for Stryker multiple times where the manager really liked me and they said they would talk to HR and try to push things around, but it never worked out. So it was extremely disappointing. But I think because it is such a great company and everyone wants to work for Stryker, right? So it's important to still keep going. Just pretend it never happened, move on, next day start the next application and see where it takes you. In the end, it works out. You know what you want, and eventually life takes you towards that, and eventually you'll end up in a place where you really like your job and like what you're doing.
Excellent, thank you. Massa, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, from an academic point of view, I think getting a J visa is not hard at all, and I think also H visas can happen. For me, I've had a green card application through family that was like 20 years old and it was still pending. And at some point I got fed up, so I applied for my own through just I don't know, like a job merit or something like that. So if you have enough publications and you have grants, you can do it yourself, and it took only a year. So it can happen.
Great. Well, thank you again to everyone. We have definitely run out of time. I really appreciate our panelists staying late, and to those of you who also stayed late. Again, I hope this was helpful. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of Graduate Professional Week.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.